Let the torch of freedom burn.
This is the intersection of faith and the culture. Thanks for joining us, where we are preserving and passing the torch of freedom. This is a program where we look at things from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. It's the intersection of faith and the culture, and by joining us today, you are a part of the solution. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate you as a listener. We want to encourage you to go to our website at wallbuilderslive.com, get more of the programming. It's available there. You can look in the archives and listen to previous interviews or Good News Fridays or Foundations of Freedom Thursday. A lot of information there at the website, wallbuilderslive.com. Also consider making a one-time or monthly contribution. Here we are at the end of the year. Great time to make that tax-deductible donation. Now, we've been listening over the last couple of days to Rabbi Daniel Lapin speaking at the ProFamily Legislators Conference, so we're going to jump right back in where we left off yesterday. This is Rabbi Lapin speaking on don't tremble, don't despair, don't rage, do this instead.
Division can't be good. You only have to see the story of America's first 40-year segment that I examined and the current 40-year segment to see that division is not good. But wait a moment. Remember just 2 minutes ago I told you that the word divide appears in day one also. And God divided between the light and the darkness. How come that can be good? So when it says God divided between the water here and the water there in the second day, that's so bad we can't have the word good appear. But wait a sec, God does dividing in day one as well. So why is good okay there? And the difference, I've given you the clue. In the first day, it's a division between light and darkness, two different things. It's like lions and tigers. They're supposed to be different. Division between difference, that makes sense. But when we have a division among people who are supposed to be united, now that's a problem. This is a division between this water and that water. No, water is water. Americans are Americans. We should have been united. And the fundamental difference between 1903 to 1943 is we all were unified in our conviction that tradition is important, that tradition prevents problems, real problems. And by 1980 to 2020, we were so hostile to tradition that we were willing to accept the problems that it brought. But it's a divided country. That's not everybody. And the extent to which we are divided has become so clear over the last few decades. That division is a huge problem. How do we do it? Very, very problematic. What do? Well, obviously, some form of unification is obviously essential. The other side knows this as well, right? Which is why they're working on taking our children away from us. The dream is that indeed it should be the children that are raised by the state. McAuliffe kicks himself for speaking honestly. But he's the one who said, you have no right to decide what your children should be taught. And he's being honest. We shouldn't have punished him. How rare is it to find honesty? I mean, they believe that. Don't forget that when Israel was founded in 1948, it was founded by unreconstructed Bolsheviks. And they created the kibbutz movement, in which children were raised by, not the parents, by the institution. That's the concept. Their ultimate dream is total control over the children. That's their dream. And they want to unify the country in that belief. So surely the only antidote possible is for us here and our fellow travelers and our soldiers in arms. We have to do everything we can to unify the country in our approach. This is very hard. you need to use imagination, which is a very important part. And I'll warn you that what destroys imagination is television and YouTube. When you watch too many cat videos on YouTube, don't be surprised that your imagination gets obliterated. And the tragedy of no imagination is you are condemning yourself to never be able to jump further than you can see with your eyes. It's not possible to be an entrepreneur of an innovative technology if you don't have an imagination. You've got to be able to see things that others cannot see. And so, as you can see quite clearly, you see now with my little pep speech there, your imaginations are improving. Do you see? That vav means the word and. Now, when we were at school, back in the days where they actually taught English grammar, they used to say, you mustn't start a sentence with the word and. Do you remember that? Because a sentence is a separate, discrete thought. And just means it's a continuation. So I thought it would be interesting to take a look at just the first few verses of the book of Genesis.
Okay, friends, quick break. We got to do just a couple of breaks once in a while. All right, quick break here. We'll be right back, and you'll get to jump right back in with Rabbi Daniel Lapin. Stay with us here on WallBuilders Live.
This is Tim Barton from WallBuilders with another moment from American history. American patriot Paul Revere rode to alert Americans of the impending arrival of the British, but he also sought patriot leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock to warn them that the British were seeking their execution. Adams and Hancock were staying with the Reverend Jonas Clark in Lexington. When they asked Pastor Clark if his church was ready for the approaching British, he replied, "I've trained them for this very hour. They will fight, and if need be, die under the shadow of the house of God." Later that morning, 70 men from his church faced several hundred British in the first battle of the War for Independence. As Pastor Clark affirmed, the militia that morning were the same who filled the pews of the church meeting house on the Sunday morning before. The American church was regularly at the forefront of the fight for liberty. For more information on this pastor and other colonial patriots, go to wallbuilders.com.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. We've been listening to Rabbi Daniel Lapin today and yesterday, and frankly, tomorrow as well. This is a presentation he gave to the legislators at the ProFamily Legislators Conference called Don't Tremble, Don't Despair, Don't Rage, Do This Instead. Let's pick up with Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
That word vav, which means and, this is the Hebrew text. And the very first sentence is 7 words and 28 letters. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Why it's 7 and 28, I don't unfortunately have enough time allocated to tell you, but I do teach that. But for now, what we need for this moment, for what I'm talking about, is to notice that after the first sentence, right, the first sentence can never say and because it's in the beginning, this is it. But look at the next sentence. In green, it's a little hard to see, but in green, you'll see that letter vav, means and. And the third verse, and. Fourth verse, and. Fifth verse, and. And so it goes for the next 33 verses. So it goes past the end of chapter 1 into the third verse of chapter 2. And that's where the sequence of and, starting every verse, terminates. And that's why when I teach scrolling through Scripture, I don't treat chapter 1 of Genesis. I treat chapter 1 of Genesis plus chapter 2, verses 1 to 3. Because that's where the story of the first account of creation actually ends. The and is very important. Because what it's telling us is, it's the most frequently used letter in the 5 books of Moses. And that is because God loves connection. When God says in chapter 2, it's not good for man to be alone, that was not talking only about Adam's matrimonial prospects. It was a general statement that God has created two ways for strangers to connect in a meaningful way. One way is marriage, and the other way is through economic transactions, money. We don't like doing business with friends, but we love making friends with the people we do business with. That's right. Right in the beginning of the Bible, this idea of connecting is emphasized. So much so that in the section I'm talking about, these 34 verses of Genesis, of the beginning of Genesis, there's something rather extraordinary that happens, and that is there is a certain fixed number of words. Now, you'll understand these 34 verses are the account of the Lord creating the universe. He's creating heaven and earth, everything. And how many words does he take to describe that? Well, I'm not counting the exact number of words, but what I'm counting is the number of discrete words. Meaning, every time a word is used, it gets counted once and then not again. So in other words, how many words do we need in order to write the first 34 verses of Genesis detailing creation? When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bonds, you see, in red, we've got the word the. So we're going to count the only once. And then we've got the word separate in blue. And at the end, the very last word, separation, that's another one word. Do you follow what I'm getting at here, right? We count each use of a specific word only one time. Because that's, if you have a paint box with a number of different paints, you can make every color you want. You use it as many times as you need to, but you don't need 1,000 different paints. And so if God is talking about creating the world, well, each word is used only the one time it's actually used. Here's the amazing thing. If we took a paint box and we put in one of each element of the periodic table, the elements are all the things from which the world is made. You know, and the periodic hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, fluorine, and so on all the way forth. How many of those do you actually need to create the universe? And the answer is you need 92. It starts with hydrogen, the lightest, and it ends with uranium, number 92, the heaviest. Now, you might say, well, there are additional elements that they have found in the periodic table. You're right. Moscovium, named in honor of Moscow, they've managed to fabricate in a lab about a half or a tenth of a milligram, and it only lasts for a few seconds anyway. In other words, in terms of elements that God put in the universe, 92 of them. Anyone want to guess how many Hebrew words in the 34 verses of the story of creation? 92, of course. Yeah. Because the Bible is the blueprint to reality. And so it has to match, obviously. That's the concept. And so how do we unify and how do we connect?
All right, friends, last interruption of the day. We got a quick break here, then we'll be right back with Rabbi Daniel Lapin at the ProFamily Legislators Conference. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Have you ever wanted to learn more about the United States Constitution, but just felt like, man, the classes are boring, or it's just that old language from 200 years ago, or I don't know where to start? People want to know, but it gets frustrating because you don't know where to look for truth about the Constitution either. Well, we've got a special program for you available now called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green, and it's actually a teaching done on the Constitution at Independence Hall in the very room where the Constitution was framed. We take you both to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty and Independence Hall, and to the WallBuilders Library, where David Barton brings the history to life to teach the original intent of our founding fathers. We call it the Quick Start Guide to the Constitution because in just a few hours through these videos, you will learn the Citizen's Guide to America's Constitution. You'll learn what you need to do to help save our constitutional republic. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's going to inspire you to do your part to preserve freedom for future generations. It's called Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green. You can find out more information on our website now at wallbuilders.com. We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us today. We're going right back out to the ProFamily Legislators Conference. Here's Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
You know, I remember on Glenn Beck's television show a number of years ago, he was talking and asking me to explain this cultural clash, which I had detailed in my book, America's Real War. And I said this America's Real War is not between rich and poor, or between men and women, or between blacks and whites. America's Real War, to this day, is a war between those who believe that Judeo-Christian, Bible-based traditional values are vital for our nation's survival, because tradition prevents problems. And on the other hand, all of those who hate Bible-based traditional values because they obstruct what they call progress, hence a progressive. And so Glenn said, so how do you see these two groups? And I said, well, I see that those who support Bible-based traditional values are those who are holding America together, and everybody else are parasites. Now, let me explain something. What I've said is absolutely true. They are riding on the benefits that was built because of the Bible. Where did I come up with that idea? It's not my own. The great Reverend Doherty was a very important pastor in America during the Eisenhower administration. And he gave a famous speech, a sermon, in which he insisted that the words "under God" get placed into the pledge. President Eisenhower did that. Could it be done today? No, because back then America was still unified around the idea of values. Today it can't be done because we're no longer unified. And so I read that Reverend Doherty spoke about people who don't take Judeo-Christian Bible-based values as important as parasites, and I repeated it. And I got attacked. So I can't even begin to tell you how violent and vehement and vitriolic was the attack. And you know, in hindsight, I made a mistake. I told the truth, but I shouldn't have. I should have softened it. And I'll tell you why. Abraham built a ministry. Ancient Jewish wisdom shows that he built a ministry of 20,000 people. So, you know, think of George Whitefield, right? I mean, 20,000 people. But it was back in those days where a large city was only 100,000 people. And Abraham had that ministry. How did he do it? By thundering denunciations from his pulpit? No, you all know the answer. He invited people into his tent for dinner. You'll remember the three strangers. He didn't know they were angels. He did that for everybody. He had doors on his tent. Anybody who went by, hey, come in for a meal. He didn't say, come in for me to preach. He said, come in for a meal. And I should have remembered that lesson. We have to win this culture war. The very survival of our nation depends upon it. And the way to do it is by inviting them in. You see, what's so great about the time in which we now live, and David pointed out so well last night, here's what's so great about the time in which we live, and that is the failure of secular fundamentalism is obvious to everybody. You look at the unwed birth rate, look at the crime rate, look at the failure of children to graduate from school with anything of value. Look at the damage that's been done to the economy by the violation of fundamental Bible-based economic principles. I detail those in my two books, Thou Shalt Prosper and Bury Treasure, and Business Secrets from the Bible. It's all gone. And you can see the results. If there was ever a time where we could invite people, hey, you know what? Come look at our family. Come look at our group. And I believe one of the most effective ways of doing that is by inviting people to our homes for dinner. And we do it twice a week. We do it Friday night and we do it Saturday lunch, because it's the day we set aside for that. It's our Sabbath, it's our Shabbat. If you ask our children, can they ever remember a Shabbat meal where it was just the family? I don't think any of them could, because we've never not used the opportunity to, and our entire ministry was built that way. Our entire congregation in Southern California was grown around the dinner table. When people are eating your food, they are more open to your ideas. It's as simple as that. So buy a lovely big dining room table. And the great thing is you can get them used cheap because nobody uses them anymore.
Got to interrupt for a moment, folks. We got to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live, and we'll jump right back in with Rabbi Daniel Lapin.
This is Tim Barton from WallBuilders with another moment from American history. The Reverend James Caldwell was a famous minister during the American War for Independence. His sermons taught liberty and God's opposition to tyranny. The British hated him and tried to kill him, so for his own protection, he would actually take loaded pistols with him into the pulpit and lay them beside his Bible as he preached. In the 1780 Battle of Springfield, the Americans ran out of wadding for their guns, which was like having no ammunition. Pastor Caldwell ran inside a nearby church and returned with an armload of Watts hymnals, the pages of which would provide the much-needed wadding. He took this great Bible-based hymnal, raised it in the air, and shouted to the troops, "Now put Watts into them, boys!" This pastor's ingenuity saved the day for the Americans. For more information on Pastor James Caldwell and other colonial patriots, go to WallBuilders.com.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Here's the conclusion of Rabbi Daniel Lapin speaking on Don't Tremble, Don't Despair, Don't Rage. Here's Rabbi Lapin at the ProFamily Legislators Conference.
Buy a lovely dining room table and start a new era in your life of inviting people to dine with you. Maybe it's lunch after church on Sunday or some other time. Every now and then, just, you see you invite people over. And it's not to discuss politics, and it's not, but over the course of a table, it's not hard for people to see that your community, your family, your everything around you is more wholesome, more successful, and it's traditional, and it keeps problems away. And this is very, very effective indeed. And one of the things that you can talk about, and people are open to this if it's in a very open way, we've found, and nobody is more secular and aggressive than secular Jews. Really? Right? I mean, let's face it. I mean, those of you in your districts, you will find very often that the attacks on you will come from secular Jews. And if you try to protect yourself, you're in the danger of being charged with anti-Semitism, which is another whole topic. But that's a political ploy. But you can speak about the Bible. And I strongly recommend that you take a good look at our scrolling through Scripture. This is the teaching on the first 34 verses of Genesis. There is so much stuff to talk about there that's fundamentally non-offensive. It's a wonderful way to expose your worldview to other people without doing what I stupidly did, which was call everyone parasites. The technique is called invitation, not intimidation. Invitation, not intimidation. And that way, people will begin to see that tradition isn't frightening and it's not dangerous. Tradition prevents problems. That's what it does. Every single problem that confronts us today is a result of the abandonment of tradition. But all you do is go through those first 34 verses, and it's sheer magic, where the people's interests are science and biology and chemistry, where the people's interests are social organization and social anthropology. It's all there. The whole layout of God's plan, it's all there. It's magnificent. And it's a fantastically effective tool. Susan and I have been using it for many, many years, and we've just made this available. It's in the form of 20 video lessons, so you can take it, digest it at your own rate and at your own pace. And it's a total of about 10 hours. And that is the absolute minimum amount of time it takes to master the first 34 verses of Genesis. As you can imagine, it's deep and covers the stuff we need to know.
All right, friends, that was the conclusion of Rabbi Lapin speaking at the ProFamily Legislators Conference. Just such good information. We always enjoy having Rabbi Lapin, whether as a guest here on the program live or speaking at the Legislators Conference. Speaking of the conference, I want to encourage you to just even now start planning for next year to encourage your state rep and your state senator to attend the conference. It is an empowering few days. All kinds of great speakers like Rabbi Lapin, Kelly Shackelford, Mike Johnson, June Hunt, of course, David Barton, Bob McEwen, all of these folks. And we're going to bring you as many of those speakers as we can here on the radio program. But I just really want to encourage you to encourage your legislator to attend the conference next year. Be sure and visit the website today at wallbuilderslive.com. Lots of great resources there for you. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.